Welcome to the Bandbox. I'm Kurt.
And I'm Connor. We're a father-son duo exploring masculinity across generations.
Each episode, we'll dig into the evolving roles, stereotypes, and pressures men navigate throughout their lives.
What I try to tell you, this country, you gotta make the money first. Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, then you get the woman. That's why you gotta make your own moves.
So you sent me this clip this morning, and I haven't seen this movie. What movie is this?
This is Scarface with Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh, wow. See, I don't know Michelle Pfeiffer other than she was in an Ant-Man, like Marvel movie a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That's how out of touch I am. So is she like a famous star from your generation or what?
Yeah, she was the big A-list star. Obviously, so was Al Pacino. The reason I thought of it for today's discussion was, the issue of the Manosphere. And, this is way before that was even a thing. But I just remember working with a lot of young men around the time, back in the 80s. And when they were talking about their role model or who they wanted to aspire to be, they would refer to Tony Montana, the lead character in that movie. And that phrase from that clip, it kind of exemplifies his life goals.
The line is, in this country, you got to make the money first. Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, you get the women.
Right.
That's why you got to make your own moves. Is he talking about the U.S.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He basically, he's a coke dealer. That's what the storyline's about. He becomes like this big, kingpin, coke dealer in Miami. It's a legendary movie. Again, I'm surprised you've never heard of it. It's probably just a generational thing.
I've heard of it. I haven't ever seen it. I've definitely seen like the cultural influence everywhere. I mean, you go into any like Chicago style pizza restaurant, there's a Scarface poster.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go into like a frat house at a college, there's a Scarface poster. So I feel its presence. I just never got around to watching it. But it's interesting that it has so much staying power in the cultural landscape. What was like when you were my age, or how old were you in 1983?
I was 18.
Oh, okay. So like ripe for the influence there. What in your cohort of your generation, like what was the take on it? Like what did other men think about this movie at that time?
Well, even the issue of cocaine, it wasn't viewed as like a really horrible thing, even back then. And it was kind of seen as, I think it was even referred to at some point as the champagne of drugs, cocaine.
Whoa.
And there wasn't a lot of pushback on that movie for what it represented, which was the illegal drug trade. No one really sort of viewed it in a negative way that much. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that happen in the movie that are, things like murder. It's just kind of a twisting of the American dream for somebody to basically view that that's how you have to go about, your business as a man. Felt like that was kind of the norm for our generation. It's like, oh yeah, that yeah, it's not okay, but it's sort of okay kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right. Like you kind of have a cop out, right? It's like, oh, well, it's just a movie. Like, obviously this isn't true. But whenever someone points to it, it's clear that it's made an influence on mainstream culture over the years. Mm-hmm. But there's always an off ramp. You can say, oh, it's just Scarface. It's about the illegal drug trade and murder and all these heinous things. So you kind of have an out to just morally say, oh, well, like, we're not saying that's okay. Right. But it's still kind of like seeped into the ethos of what status as a man means. Because you hear the same kind of refrains in popular culture these days. Is like, you need money to get power. And once you have those two things, you can acquire a mate or a partner. Mm-hmm. And it's not uncommon to hear those similar thematic things in other forms of media, specifically the Manosphere, which is what we're here to discuss today. So specifically, what movie are we talking about?
The documentary. Louis Theroux is the documentarian. He kind of tries to, break into the kind of behind the scenes perspective. And I think it's a pretty telling story. What was your reaction to it?
Yeah, well, I took notes when we watched it together, Lindsay and I, my fiance. And the first thing I wrote down, and I actually wrote a timestamp because my jaw just like hit the floor. At 52 minutes and 34 seconds into the documentary, there's two young men speaking in reference to how they've been influenced by Manosphere influencers. And they said, "We don't believe in depression."
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't help but be stunned. I'm still stunned that we're in such a rich information age where there's so much good from all of the interconnectedness that we have and just the wealth of knowledge. And there are two young men who don't believe in depression, as if it's a belief system. So that just kind of struck me.
Me too. And in fact, I don't think I caught that as clearly as I did, because I've watched it twice now, and I watched it again last night to make sure I had it fresh in my head. And it's funny that you picked out that note, because that also kind of hit me square in the face, especially when I think it was the same person on the documentary that said, "We don't believe in depression," that also said he lost his brother to suicide. He said he was homeless for a time and that he's just had to move on from his brother's death. That just feels like, okay, why does he view that as a benefit? Why does he say that that's a good idea to not believe in depression, when I'm not saying his brother was depressed necessarily who died, but let's just say for a minute he struggled broadly with mental health. That wouldn't be far-fetched. But for the brother to say in one sentence, "I don't believe in depression," and in the second sentence, "and he died by suicide," feels like an impossible contradiction.
Yeah, like I wonder how he squares that in his head. It almost sounds like brainwashing, because you're holding two, like a logical thing in your head, but you're also holding an illogical thing that directly conflicts with it.
Right.
And it just feels like a telltale, like brainwashing type of scenario. Again, I'm not a clinician, so I don't know any of the terms for all this stuff, but it's interesting.
You don't have to be a clinician. I think you have to be able to trust your eyes and trust your ears. And you can do that as well as I can as a clinician. I mean, I don't have to be a clinician to say those things. Neither do you. The thing that also blew my mind is he's sort of looking for a role model. And I think there was a point where that same not an actor, he's a real person, basically interacts with one of the social media influencers. I can't remember the guy's name, but he shakes his hand and says, he says to this influencer, "You are my role model. And you've taught me that we're born into this world as nothing," or something to that effect. And we have to make our own value. In other words, we're not born with, I guess, assets that by comparison are that women have, let's say, and that somehow men have to sort of create their own value, whereas women sort of automatically have it. That part was like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, it's really sick and twisted. Yeah.
And then in the same breath, he's wanting to view this guy as a role model, and yet he's lost his brother. I couldn't square that. It was really hard for me to hear. So anyway, what else? I'm curious to know your other reactions, other parts, certainly the depression thing. What else kind of jumped out to you in that documentary?
Yeah, well, I think the big one, this is sort of an overarching thing, but it seems to me like the social media machine, it's a huge economic machine in this day and age, right? You can make a lot of money influencing. And I think Louis did a great job with his documentary team of exemplifying that these influencers, they don't even seem to necessarily believe in what they're preaching, because you get that kind of like on camera persona that's very like hyper masculine, in this sort of constrained by a man box, right? Like they're very traditionally defined. They have defined themselves in a traditionally masculine way. Like historically, archaically.
Mm-hmm.
But then you see like the shots of them talking to there's like one guy talking to his mom while they're not actually taping, and it sounds like a normal conversation. And so it almost reminds me of like the Wizard of Oz, where like the wizard has like this curtain up, and there's this like foreboding, like I am Oz, and then it's just a tiny little man behind the curtain pretending to be something that he's not. And to me, this just seems like one big grift. That was one thing that I noticed, right? It's like, if you can find young men that are starved for role models, that are starved for an example, that don't have a good example, and you can monetize it, you're basically profiting off of people's misery and sorrow and depression and struggle. And that was a huge takeaway from me for this documentary.
One of the characters or influencers said that directly and without any shame, and said that, yeah, like he finds some of the, like OnlyFans disgusting, yet he makes money off of it, I guess.
Right.
And he does things that he knows his mom would absolutely, not accept, but he owns that it's just him being a businessman.
It is just kind of a business. Like these social media platforms are set up in a way to where they algorithmically incentivize outrage.
Then maybe he's not a hypocrite.
He's being irresponsible with the influence and the reach that he has.
Right. Well, that's the part that struck me, is that all the young people tend to, when they were filming, flock to these people when they see them on the street and high five them. And, these young teenage boys, I didn't notice the same kind of attention from women, but it was like hero worship across the board, like, yo, and taking selfies and doing this thing and that, and this, that, the other. Those young men are loving it. It seems like these big name influencers are winning the battle.
Certainly not every young man doesn't have a positive role model, but there also is, I noticed there was a pattern, and Thoreau made a point of this, that a lot of these influencers they were lacking a male role model in the house, like a father figure. And I wonder if there's some sort of, whether it be known or unknown to the two parties, like if there's some sort of camaraderie and sort of absent father figures, like in the audience, and then also the influencers themselves. Maybe they both pick up on that. Maybe that's a factor.
You sent me a clip from Scott Galloway, one of his podcasts, and I think it was also his reaction to the Manosphere, and it was something to the effect of, and check me on this, something like these influencers, it seems, were kind of starving for connection and attention, and whether that had anything to do with their histories or their families of origin, it wasn't entirely clear. But it does make you wonder. I mean, in the examples that it gave in the Manosphere, is there a lot of pain behind the eyes? I mean, when it showed that one scene where, again, I'm remiss to remember the names of these particular folks, but one of the influencers showed footage of him meeting his father, who hadn't seen in, I don't know, like 10 years or something. And that felt like a pain point for that particular individual. So maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's something to this absent father thing that impacts males significantly. And I certainly would say that was a theme in my work as a clinician.
We talked about in one of our previous episodes about like painting a fabric of what masculinity looks like. I don't think there's one thing we can point to. We can't say exclusively that everyone who falls under the influence of the Manosphere is fatherless or role model-less. The only thing I can think of is like the network effect of being around peers, and maybe there's a peer who gets another young man into this world.
Right.
Maybe it's sort of a shared experience thing. Like maybe you're in school. Neither of us have young kids, right? So I'm not as connected to the school system as I once was, but I do posit that maybe there are kids who bring this stuff into the public forum, like the school, and then it becomes like a shared activity, like almost like a club, like a social club of like, oh, I'm part of the Manosphere. I'm going to show it to my friend. We're all going to partake.
Okay, well, here's a direct question for you then. In your generation, what is it that protects you against the direct influence of the Manosphere?
Everyone's like social media feed is very specific to their interests. And so I think most of my social media is like audio things or like music production things or like living spaces, like arranging your home or like just inspirational, like more positive stuff. So I do wonder if one factor is like my algorithm is not feeding me negativity based around like gender relations or manosphere stuff. I certainly think that's a factor, right? So like, yeah, I'm not being fed that by my algorithm. I think that's number one. I think number two is this is kind of silly, but if you're working full time, you don't have enough time to sort of go down the rabbit hole. You know, if you're busy, if you're occupied, if you're doing constructive things, there's no space for all of this nonsense.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Another one I think is at least like talking to my peers in my generation again, sort of, I'm in like an older Gen Z or a young or a, wait, what is it? Hold on. An older Gen Z or a young millennial. I'm kind of like towing the line. I don't think we're as chronically online as some of the younger folks might be.
Okay.
I mean, I'm curious what you think of this too, but it seems like this manosphere is almost exclusively online. It's not really a phenomenon that takes place in person. I mean, maybe it does. I don't know, but you know, I think the less time you spend online and sort of that echo chamber, the less influenced you are by it.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I just kind of wonder, like even for me, you know, I'm obviously a generation or a little bit more older than you. I'm trying to think like what protects me. It's kind of a lot of the same things. You know, I'm not online, at least not looking at socials very much. Maybe it's because I've already kind of developed my values, my beliefs. And even if I were to be hit pretty consistently with a different set of beliefs and values, stereotypically, maybe I'm more set in my ways. And I'm not saying you are. Maybe you're right. This whole algorithm thing, like that kind of happens to me too. Like when I'm shopping for like batteries for my power tools, somehow Facebook immediately knows that I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Or Instagram. And so I get all these ads for like batteries. I'll look at one on one of my devices. And by the time I open my laptop, I'm getting a steady stream of ads about that equipment. It's kind of creepy. Or my choice in podcasts. I mean, what do I listen to? That kind of thing. That I'm sure that is going to show up differently if I stop on little snippets of whatever. It's going to sort of factor that in, right?
Turning from a boy into a young man and then eventually a grown man. I think part of that sort of journey is, like you said, like developing your values, developing your morals, developing your sort of compass, like where you want to be in life, where you want to go, what your goals are. And as you get further along in life, you're sort of not, I think set in your ways is maybe a bit of a self put down. I think grounded is a better phrase. Like you're grounded in what your identity is, what you want to be, who you think you are. And I think like for me, like once you've sort of grounded yourself and your self identity, you're less prone to the influence of this stuff.
And maybe that's exactly why it's so dangerous for young men, because they're not necessarily grounded yet. I can remember even when I was about your age, I was hanging with some people that, you know, I would end up making not great decisions. And I was like, okay, I better pull back on that. So another, I think, important thing is learning from experience. And sometimes we look at patterns of addiction or repetitive behavior, people that react to negative consequences tend to do better overall and tend not to get prone to addictive patterns because they sort of experience the negative consequences as a corrective experience. It's like, yeah, that didn't work out so well. I'm going to go a different direction. And some of that is based on things like, I don't know, guilt, anxiety, etc., that aren't necessarily bad. The part that struck me about back to the documentary was, if they really don't care what Thoreau does or says, why are they so kind of freaked out by it? Because a couple of points, they seemed almost anxious about what he was going to say. They kept saying, well, this is a hit piece. This is a hit piece. Well, no, it's probably just, exposing more people to what's kind of, under the hood. Like, what's it actually about?
I did want to just ask you, like, do you have any colleagues, friends, other men who have sort of fallen into this?
I would say, yeah. Like, I don't spend a lot of time with some of these folks anymore. It's hard to stay friends with some of those folks just because they'll say really kind of bananas kinds of things. It just became like not fun to hang out.
Okay, so that actually, I'm glad that I asked you that, because it actually brings up exactly what I want to talk about next. So in this documentary, like, Louis uses silence to kind of get these guys to reflect, because they're so used to sort of the popcorn, like, instant responses, not really thinking and just letting like word salad basically fly. But Louis kind of makes them break down by just kind of staring at them, which is honestly comical. It's kind of funny to watch him just look at them, and they look like sincerely uncomfortable, because you can tell that these guys, they're not used to being called out, because they can just control the narrative. So whether it's choosing who they speak to, or choosing what to post, or having a lot of heavy editorial oversight of things that are posted, they have curated the image exactly how they see it, with no input or feedback from their cohort or from other fellow men, women, whatever.
Right.
And so it reminds me of the friend you're talking about. I think a big part of friendship and camaraderie and companionship even as well is sort of checking each other, right? Like a true friend will call you out when you're an a-hole, or that's Connor, you're thinking about this the wrong way, or Kurt, you're thinking about this the wrong way. Like, you need to take a step back and look at this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't like back off from this friendship of yours to protect your own peace and sanity, but it is interesting that these so-called strongmen of the Manosphere can't handle criticism because they're so used to being in this bubble.
No, that's an excellent point. And if I'm putting on my clinician hat for a minute, that's the best therapeutic tool we have. You ask a question and you shut your mouth.
What does that do? Does it force people to look inward and like self-evaluate, or what does that do?
I think that the most toxic part of someone's mental health struggle is, I would call it self-deception. The more you are self-deceptive, it doesn't matter what I say as a counselor, helper, therapist, because people can develop incredible defenses around being held accountable. If you're just using silence, they have nothing to really push back against. Let's say you ask a hard question and you don't fill that empty space with another question or a comment. It's like they're on the clock. Silence is the best antidote to self-deception.
And I think Thoreau knows that really well when he's talking with these folks and when they were making this documentary. So hats off to him. I think he really got under their skin.
Yeah, he's a good interviewer, and he's also really good at letting them kind of make fun of him. And he's obviously got a really thick skin.
Yeah.
And so he's able to tolerate, somebody kind of, I don't know, targeting him. But what ends up happening, they end up looking kind of foolish.
Well, I was just going to say, like, sort of ironically, in a twist, Louis seems more masculine and sort of grounded than they do, because he can handle criticism. He listens more than he speaks. He's reflective, gets both sides of the conversation. He asks the girlfriends and the wives and the mothers of these people what they think. The subject matter is not comical, but the way in which Louis presents it makes it comical. It just completely passes over their heads, which is just hilarious.
Yeah, in the last scene when he goes for his record number on that punching bag thing. Uh, that's,
Yeah.
that's a really funny ending. What's also true is he's not trying to belittle these guys. I think he's just trying to do what we just talked about. He's trying to get them to take a look at themselves.
He's not even like calling, there's no call to action. He's just asking them questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's very like, it seems like a therapy session almost. He's just kind of letting them take the lead and letting them do all the work. And he's just kind of there.
Right. It was a pretty clever documentary. And it's not to say this was a competition like who won, even though I think
right.
a lot of influencers were viewing this as a competition. He was just trying to get at sort of the real story behind the story. I don't know how long ago it was made, but I'd be curious to know what they thought of the documentary after it was released.
And I would love to know what these influencers think about Scarface.
I would assume they know about it. That'd be a fair assumption, do you think?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Or something similar, something where you've got this male, I don't think protagonist is the right word. It's almost like an anti-hero, antagonist type of figure who's doing something illegal but has made money off of it. And so it sends a message like, oh, okay, well, yeah, you've killed some people, you've dealt some drugs, you've laundered money, but you have power and influence now. So I guess we can forgive that. I think this plays into a bigger idea about society is I think societally we permit behaviors and actions and words being said if there's something that like societally we deem is like worth it. So I'm thinking of like, there's a lot of like creeps and weirdos and just diabolical people in the music industry who are very talented. And for some reason they get a pass because they have so much to offer the world.
Yeah, it certainly feels like that's the time in which we're living. You know, at least at the end of Scarface, you know, I think you could probably say, you know, at the end, crime doesn't pay. So there's at least some measure of accountability, but not necessarily now.
Is there anything else that struck you about the documentary or just the Manosphere at large?
We sort of already touched on this a little bit, but I just, my heart kind of breaks for young men who, for whatever reason, it sort of resonates for them, or they find it reinforcing, or they find it even inspiring. But I think whether you call it depression or maybe it's not depression that young man was referring to, maybe it's something equally troubling, like endless despair or hopelessness or whatever word, loneliness. It makes me wonder, the hope for this pod is, okay, so whatever we call it, you can call it depression, you can call it despair, you can call it whatever you want to call
irritability. Well, you just mentioned in an earlier episode, like irritability is a symptom of depression. So you could call it irritability.
Right. And to me, it's like, to be helpful, okay, what should people do that's not hook, line, and sinker buying into all of the stereotypes in the manosphere that are potentially harmful to others, especially? I think that's probably worth some discussion as we kind of move through this particular issue. Like, so kind of the question, like, now what? We know this is a thing. We know this is a major influence. So let's talk for a couple of minutes in the spirit of, remember we said we wanted to be helpful and fun. What works for you as a young man when you encounter whatever word we've talked about, irritability, depression, despair? What have you discovered as successful in your young life to get you back on track?
Oh, well, I mean, this is going to sound so stereotypical, but the number one thing is therapy, right? I think just getting into therapy and having that sort of accountability partner in a therapist is really useful. And, you know, like, I think like a lot of men, it hasn't always been easy for me to recognize, like, I need therapy right now. You know, a lot of men are not in touch with that side of themselves because you shouldn't be expressing any of this stuff. I mean, I was just thinking about this the other day, like, for certain like government jobs, for instance, they take like a very in-depth look at your mental health background. And so I do wonder if that plays a part in perpetuating people downplaying the importance of mental health, specifically men. That's just one example, but back to my original point here, getting therapy is crucial because you need sort of a third party that doesn't have a stake in your life, like a partner or like a friend or someone just to kind of be like no, you're like, think more about this kind of thing. So that's the biggest one for me, I think. I think the other thing is just moving your body. A lot of these sound so silly and easy to do, but
no.
they're really therapeutic. Like whenever like my head is spiraling about like a work commitment or I'm frustrated with something or irritable, I find that just like going on a walk around my block just helps reset.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even have to be a long thing too, right? Or like a regular thing. It's just if you can recognize the feeling of sadness, despair, irritability when it's coming up and just get your body moving, do something to generate the endorphins, get the vitamin D cooking. I think that really helps.
I love that. Yeah.
I think the last thing I want to mention is music and arts and just culture. This looks different for everyone, but like some people love eating food, or like if you're in a cool area with like a cool hip art scene, like getting out there and like crate digging, finding vinyl records, physical items, connecting with like local musicians or going to a show or meeting up with a friend for a coffee to discuss a record that you were listening to or a record that you love listening to or like a film, or even go to the movies, right? Just some sort of a shared experience to get around people. Because I find that like being around other people, not on the internet, but being around people in real life really helps with this stuff. And it doesn't even have to be a big deal what you're doing. You could go shopping. You could go grocery shopping together. There's also this trend on the internet where people are saying, like, let's all do a double date where we do a life admin night, where basically you're having a double date, but you're just working on like your taxes or paying your bills or
really?
like work.
So what'd you call that?
A life admin date or a life admin night.
That's
Like doing life administration.
That's literally like a phrase that's used.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I've never in my life heard that, but I mean, it sounds kind of functional. So in other words, you're saying that it doesn't require like professional therapy. There's so many things you can do over and above therapy, like formal, right? You're saying
Yes.
just daily things that would take the edge off and are productive and inspiring and energy giving, etc.
Right. And
Okay.
and just to dig into the productive thing, we live in a very, I need to figure out how to monetize this type of environment, right? So like, oh, I have a hobby, I want to monetize it. None of this stuff requires that. Let go of that, right? Like, get out there and play pickleball with a friend, or get out there and kick a soccer ball around, or throw a football. You don't have to make money from everything. I think a lot of the healing that needs to take place, if people are feeling down and vulnerable to online influences, just to get around other people. I think it's really that simple.
Yeah, I love that.
What about you? What about from your perspective?
I mean, I do a lot of the same things. I think, for me, lifting weights is a big deal. It's a great way to get pent up emotions out, doing something super physical. I like to work on cars, sling a hammer, do things like that just help me, I don't know, distract myself, redirect my energy, take a bit of a reprieve from whatever it is I'm doing, kind of what you said. So pretty much the same things, and, talking to people, talking to colleagues, talking to your mom. I mean, that's a huge, huge thing for me.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm stressed, it certainly helps that she's a trained therapist, but that's not why I talk to her. Because there's like your mom in therapy mode, and then there's your mom and just being herself, and just talking to somebody who will check you and be honest with you. I think that's super important, kind of back to that, accountability thing, somebody to check you. You said you said the definition of a good friend is that somebody who's going to be honest with you, right? That going to say, "Nah, you need to rethink that, Connor," or whatever. I think we all need more people like that in our life. And if you look at bona fide, well-established therapeutic approaches, guess what? That's one of the most important things that we have, both professionally, and it turns out it came from our personal lives. Like that's what informs what professional therapy is what happens in our personal lives that we know to be impactful. That's where we learn these things. It's not like the other way around. We don't discover these things based solely on science,
right,
and then implement them. It's actually life that teaches us what to do.
We've been talking about the man box sort of constraining men and sort of enslaving them to traditional ideals of what they should be. Well, I think part of like breaking out of this box is realizing that an important component of modern masculinity is being able to take criticism and being able to self-reflect and really look deep into yourself and say like, wow, I really need to change this. Mm-hmm. And so back to the point that you're saying is that sort of tough love is important, having a friend to check you, but also just having like friends and partners and family members who, when you need to be vulnerable with them, they're loving and forgiving and empathetic and can be a shoulder to lean on in the moments where, like, maybe there's a time and a place for this sort of tough love that we're talking about, but there's also a place where you need the gentleness and the nurturing. Frankly, I just don't think there's a lot of that with male to male friendships or male to male interactions. And so that's another big component of it, is just having friends where you can be that vulnerable with each other.
Really great point. One last comment about the Manosphere. But there's a couple of points where, just like from a human level, I wanted to like give those guys a hug. It's like, you so need a hug, dude. I know. You just need a hug, because it was just painful to listen to them say things that they desperately wanted to fully believe. I wasn't always sure that they believed what they were saying.
No.
So anyway, back to your main point, which is, yes, you can still keep your man card and be emotionally nurturing and honest and a provider of tough love. You can actually do that all at the same time.
Right. Young men specifically need to de-emphasize either or and focus on the both and.
Nice.
You can be multiple things. You can be loving, but you can also be tough. You can also be emotionally available, but also protective of your emotional well-being. You can be all these things at the same time. And I think that's like, again, just to bring it back to the internet and the Manosphere, like the Manosphere is seductive because it's giving a simple black and white solution to loneliness and alienation. But the truth is, it's really not that simple. You need to be able to, as a well-adjusted human, you need to be able to hold all of these things. That's like part of being human. And I think it's attractive. The Manosphere is attractive because it offers a basic solution, a simple fix.
Yeah, well, I think that's perfectly said. And I think that should be our last main point, is what you just said.
Okay. Well, looking forward to the next discussion.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for listening to The Man Box. If today's conversation resonated with you, share it with someone you care about.
If you like the show, make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Man Box is produced, edited, mixed, and mastered by Connor Michael. Artwork is by Livia Michael.
The Man Box is not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. If you're struggling, please seek help by calling or texting 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. We'll see you next time.